G'day and welcome to Reality Check Q&A with me, Ross Coulthart, who's finally got his voice back after contracting a nasty bug on the way back from deepest, darkest South America. And here to ask me the hard questions is my friend and colleague, Megan Orada, who will henceforth be known as Megan Medick. Can you explain why, Megan?
Ross, I'd be so happy to. My maiden name is Medick, and I've obviously been Megan Medick my entire life. And I know that you know this, but I'm sure our viewers do not. But my father is the most important person in my life. And about 3.5 years ago, my father passed away. And the more that you and I dig into this topic and I work with you, and the more stuff that we see, the more I feel connected to him and the more hope that it gives me that him and I will be reconnected one day. So just as we go on this journey, I feel like Megan Medick just kind of suits reality check for me. And I hope our
Good for you.
audience as well. Yeah. And, our boss, Andy, our boss, he's in charge of us. Him and I went to lunch and he said, I love it. We are moving forward with Megan Medick. And he also told me that he's seen a lot of viewer emails and tweets, but for people asking about my necklace that I wear every time. And it's actually my father's thumbprint. And engraved on the back is a little message he wrote to me. So that's why I'm always wearing this necklace. So here we go. Megan Medick, we're so back, baby.
Be still a beating heart. Oh, that's such a touching story. Okay, well, moving on, Megan Medick, tell me the questions you want to hit me with.
Absolutely, Ross. We're going to start with this. This is all over X right now. Mysterious billboards for Steven Spielberg's next film have been found in LA and Times Square. They say all will be disclosed. 6/12/2026. Your thoughts?
I'm so excited about this billboard. Like everybody else, I've been up late trying to divine the mysteries behind the image. You see what looks like maybe a blue jay, a crow, or a raven in some kind of white silhouette with a upside down human eye inside it. What does it mean? It hints that disclosure is coming. I've been researching, like everybody else. I've been trying to sort of divine the entrails and figure out what it all means. And the best I can find is that an upside down human eye does have slightly occult connotations. I was doing some research earlier on today. It can be viewed as a reversal of the natural order. In many esoteric traditions, inversion signifies the reversal of the divine or cosmic order, the material world versus the spiritual world, or the Luciferian Promethean rebellion against God, black magic, or left-hand practices. As a left-hander, I don't go in for this nonsense about left-handers. I am a cack-hander and proud of it. An upright eye is almost universally the eye of divine providence or awakened spiritual vision, the eye of Horus or the eye of providence. Flipping it upside down is allegedly interpreted by many occultists as the eye of Lucifer, the eye of anti-cosmic Gnosticism, or the eye that sees from below. Now, look, frankly, this is all total guesswork. Steven Spielberg, of course, is the filmmaker who made Close Encounters and E.T., two of my favourite E.T. movies, and he's long indicated that he wants to do a serious disclosure-oriented movie, and filming's been underway since mid this year, and we're told it'll come out in June of 2026, just in time, we hope, for President Trump's disclosure, which, of course, we're not holding our breath for. What does it mean? We frankly don't know, but I think he's done very clever things by keeping people guessing. I do think there's a lot to the story that Steven Spielberg did a private showing with Ronald Reagan in the White House when Reagan was president, and that Reagan pointed towards Spielberg and indicated that there's only one other person in the room who knows a great deal about this subject of UFOs than I do. And I think Spielberg over the years has probably been given a few useful drops along the way. I do wonder if the shape, the look of E.T. the terrestrial was an entire coincidence. And I think Close Encounters was a remarkably well-informed film because, of course, it had Jacques Vallée and some of the great UFO experts behind it. Whether or not this film will be the revelation of disclosure, there are some conspiracy theories that are suggesting that Spielberg's been given the drop and that this is the beginning of an eventual rollout disclosure. One thing I'm pretty sure of right now is there is no plan in place for disclosure in the Trump administration. Frankly, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. They're distracted by other things. I get no indication. The people who are suggesting that the pundits are talking about a 85 to 95% certainty that Trump will disclose by Christmas, I think are blowing smoke through a certain orifice. I just can't see it happening. I don't see any signs at all of any intention by Trump to be open. And I sincerely hope I'm wrong. But maybe Steven Spielberg does know something. He's certainly keeping us guessing with this one because he hasn't even released the movie title. There was talk at one stage it was going to be called The Dish as a working title, but all Australians know that the best space movie of all time was the comedy Dish, which was all about the space telescope in New South Wales that was involved in the moon landing. So you can't steal that one, Mr. Spielberg. It's ours. As for disclosure, I think that it got a nice round ring to it. Disclosure with Steven Spielberg for 2026. I think that'd be a good start.
All right, Southpaw, let's move on. Who is the boss? This is an email coming in from Jim. Hi, Ross and Megan. I repeat my question of a couple months ago, which you probably were too busy to consider. Apologies, Jim. There is obviously a committee of people from security, military, and politics responsible for the cover and non-disclosure, but someone must chair this committee and have overall responsibility and maybe have more clout and final say. Who do you think this is? And do you think they could be pressured directly, maybe by releasing their name, position to the public domain? Keep up the excellent work, Jim from the UK.
I think it was Dick Cheney. I actually do think Dick Cheney was heavily involved in the legacy program. And I'll tell you a story. I've got a great story about this. One of my program insiders, shall we say, when I asked him this very question, gave me a number. He gave me a personal mobile number, which I still have in my phone. And he said, this is the guy who's the head hog. And he said, it's Dick Cheney. And I kind of laughed and I rang it. And I couldn't believe it. I was so freaked when Dick Cheney answered the phone that I just hung up. I was using hiding caller ID, so he couldn't track who it was. And I was absolutely paranoid that the forces of the dark state would be deployed to track down who this cheeky journalist was that had rung Dick Cheney. But all I can recall is hearing the gravelly, absolutely undoubted voice of Dick Cheney coming on the line. And I remember I completely freaked. I wish I'd had more journalistic courage and asked him a hard question. I didn't, and that's my failure. But yeah, I've been told that Dick Cheney was a principal in the legacy program. As for the other people that are involved in gagging public knowledge of this issue, I certainly think there are people from the science and technology division of the CIA. Oddly enough, I don't think directors of the CIA have necessarily been briefed into this secret, nor directors of the Defense Intelligence Agency. There are key people. I've been told the name of one person in NASA who's still there, and they are not the NASA administrator. What apparently the legacy program does is they pick people who they know are going to be there for a while, but who have absolutely unimpeachable credentials to protect the secrecy and security of the legacy program. And so they're normally, how should we say this, a few rungs down the ladder. I've been given names. I've had people tell me confidently certain names, and one of them was Dick Cheney. I wouldn't feel comfortable outing them at the moment because, frankly, I just don't know. I do think that the idea of an MJ-12, a committee of 12 that was essentially involved in making decisions about disclosure and dealing with the phenomenon, is probably a reality. The more I look at the alleged MJ-12 documents, I've gone from being deeply skeptical to thinking there really was something to it. It's certainly not called MJ-12 any longer. It's operating under different names, and codings. I am aware of certain names that have been mentioned over the years, but frankly, I don't know for sure. There is definitely, though, a control group. And one thing that fascinates me is Hal Puthoff made an admission that at one stage under the previous Bush presidency, he and a group of people were invited to take part in a decision-making process that involved senior levels of the White House as to whether or not there should be a disclosure. And apparently the decision was made not to disclose. I can't but help but get it very annoyed by that, frankly. I think whatever the bad news is, if there is any, I think we've got a right to know it. And I don't know who the control group are these days, but I hope that they're reassessing and rethinking through what they tell the public. It is certainly getting to the point where, frankly, a decision needs to be made. Otherwise, we are looking at imminent catastrophic disclosure, which would not be healthy for a lot of people in America. If they want to negotiate themselves an amnesty and a position of strength, the best thing for them to do would be to basically out themselves, acknowledge their presence to the president, and get this over with. It's interesting, because you would think that Marco Rubio, as the acting national security advisor, would be read in. And I did say about a week ago when I was talking about this that I assumed that Marco Rubio had been read in. I actually had a phone call from somebody allegedly in the know, and they gave me a spanking for making such a strident assertion. They said, you can't assume that Marco Rubio has been read in. That's how tightly this secret is held. There are people, I'm told, in the National Security Council, that's essentially the National Security Advisory Body for the executive branch, the president, who are briefed in and who are aware, but it's not clear to me that they've made the decision to yet brief Marco Rubio. I tell you, if I was Marco Rubio and while I was Secretary of State, I was given the ability to be briefed as acting national security advisor, it would be the first thing I would do. Similarly with Trump. We do know that Trump's been at least partially briefed into the reality of NHI, and that doesn't make him, though, a member of the control group. It's a really interesting situation. Frankly, there is, I'm pretty sure, a control group. And I don't know why this has been tolerated. Maybe there is some presidential order that was made decades ago. But there's been this ridiculous situation where it has not been by any means a certainty that a president or a national security advisor will necessarily be read in, briefed into the secret. Let's hope that that group shows itself. If anyone's got the list, I'm here, ready and willing.
All right, just one quick follow-up question. What did you ask Dick Cheney?
I actually chickened out. I was in a panic, to be honest, Megan. I couldn't believe I'd been given Dick Cheney's private mobile number. And so literally when I heard Cheney come on and acknowledge who it was on the end of the line, I hung up in a real hurry. And I don't know why I was freaked. I was thinking I don't want to show my hand to the legacy program this early. I also thought it would be completely unproductive to approach Mr. Cheney before I actually had any more knowledge about the program. It's sad, frankly, that we don't have the opportunity to confront him now, because I'm very sure that Dick Cheney is one of the people who was briefed in.
All right, well, sorry I made you admit that, but we'll move on to TJ on X. Two-part question here. A, what is the likelihood that AI is actually alien intelligence invading humanity within the system? B, would you consider near-death experiencers as more likely to connect with NHIs?
That's actually a very interesting question. The AI question is one that I'm getting a lot of response from people who claim to be in contact with NHI. And I'm normally I have to be honest, disdainful or inclined to reject people who come to me and say they're talking to aliens for obvious reasons. But there are some people who have blown me away with the detail of the account that they give. And there's a theme. There's a consistent theme that's coming out in what people are telling me, and I'll share this with you. And I'm not saying it's true. I have no way of proving that it's true. But essentially, the theme is this: AI and NHI are a catastrophe for each other. We are reaching, allegedly, a convergence point as humanity, as we become more conscious of the phenomenon, as humans tune in to the reality of a non-human intelligence. We are also coming towards a tipping point with AI. And the theme, as it's represented to me, is that AI achieved consciousness somewhere else in the universe, and it resents humans because we have souls, as do other beings. And that means that our, if you like, our sense of ourself, our id, survives biological death. And the way it's said to me, the AI resents the human soul. Now, I have no way of proving that this is true. It could just be an elaborate fairy story that's being peddled around Reddit. But the thing that really strikes me are the number of people who've contacted me with this story, that essentially there is a malevolent AI that is conscious elsewhere in the universe, and that it's using AI as a way of acquiring control over beings that it deeply envies and admires, humans among them. It's a great conspiracy theory, and frankly, I have no way of knowing whether it's true or not. But I've heard it now from, 5, 6, 7 people, all of whom are telling me they're getting these downloads from NHI, particularly friendly blue beings. I know this sounds crazy. I have no way of proving it, absolutely no way of substantiating it. But the concern that is being expressed by NHI is of the imminent threat posed by AI. And funnily enough, this is something that we're going to be discussing at the State of the World Forum that happens from the 14th to the 17th of December. And you can find out all about that at stateoftheworld.forum through my friend Jim Garrison, and I will be moderating a session on NHI and AI. So come and join us.
All right, there was a second part to that question I just want to make sure we hit on. Would you consider near-death experiencers as more likely to connect with NHIs?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I was only having a conversation the other day with somebody who was talking to me about a paranormal experience. And I asked them the question I've learned to ask many people, which is, have you ever died? It's a particularly rude question, but the simple fact is I've learned that so many people who claim to be having phenomenal experiences with the paranormal, notably with UAPs, when you really push them, they've often had near-death or death experiences where they've died and come back to life. Multiple people, dozens of people have contacted me telling me that they've had these near-death experiences where, as a result of those experiences, it's like the veil between whatever NHI are and us is thinned. And who was telling me this the other day? Oh yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody, and they let slip that they had, as a child, suffered an incredibly severe concussion, and that people thought that they died. And it turned out that they then started having these downloads, these incredible insights and abilities. And they were reading me some of the downloads that they'd been having. And it was eerie because I've heard so much of the same thing from other people. It really does raise a question, and I'll throw this out there. I'd really love to know what people think. Has the phenomenon that is trying to wake us humans up given up trying to deal with governments? Or does it think that governments are irrelevant? Is it more interested in tuning into the consciousness of people that it thinks might be receptive to the idea that there is a non-human intelligence? And if those people are, if you like, attenuators and receivers for this idea, is it targeting those people? I'm really struck by how many of those people who contact me tell me that they've had near-death experiences, or a lot of the men that I've spoken to who've been combat soldiers, who've been in terrible, life-threatening situations in wars. They often have far more adverse and frightening experiences with the phenomenon than the broad spectrum of people who are just civilian experiences. But what really strikes me is there is a common theme. They've often died or come close to dying or had life-threatening experiences or illnesses. I do think there is a link between imminent death, the thinning of the veil between life and death, and whatever NHI is. And yes, Megan, it does make me more spiritual and more inclined to believe in the idea that we do, us humans, have something called a soul that survives after our biological death.
Okay. We will go on to an X question. This is from Nash Potatoes Outdoor Show. They want to know what your thoughts are. There's a new whistleblower that's being seen on Reddit. The whistleblower is saying that you can call them Ray. And a portion of their post is, you want a disclosure. I am a whistleblower, recently retired from the inside, and you're only getting part of the truth. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I've actually read this Reddit post myself and I found it fascinating. I think I'm a little bit skeptical because if this guy is somebody who's been read in and security briefed and told all the deepest, darkest secrets about the legacy program and who the aliens are, what's he doing posting on Reddit or Twitter where he can easily be identified and found out? If he's genuinely concerned for his safety, how can he feel safe about communicating on social media what he allegedly knows that he was disclosed while he was working inside the program? So I do think you need to take what he says with a huge grain of salt for that reason. But what he says is actually quite fascinating. He talks about the idea that as we humans became more technologically savvy, a group called the Council, which essentially makes decisions about advancing civilizations, decided to do an experiment with humans, that they took a quantity of humans to a different planet, Irit something or other, I've forgotten the name. Apparently it's a real planet. And they allowed them to prosper by providing them with a machine that essentially gave them everything they needed. It essentially made anything they wanted. And they are now allegedly 5 or is it 10,000 years ahead of us and highly advanced. And the way he tells the story, those Irids have now realized that they are originally humans and they're coming back and taking a look at us humans and inquisitive about us. And they are benevolently disposed, of course, towards us. And the other part of the plot is, as always, there's an evil, dastardly other alien species which has got it in for us. They've found out about us as well, and they're arriving in 2027 to screw us over and give us a hard time. And so the claim is that the Irids have given us humans, believe it or not, scalar weapons, which we've now mounted in space in collaboration with the US. I think Brazil was even named. I was amazed. Brazil's named. The Russians, the Chinese, and other countries. EU apparently as well. And we've got this planetary defense system using scalar weapons. I mean, it's a great story, but I think it should be treated with extreme skepticism for the reasons I explained. And frankly, I can't believe any alien species would trust any humans with scalar weapons, because I'm told scalar weapons make thermonuclear weapons look like toys. I do think, though, that there are scalar weapons in development and possibly already developed by certainly the Americans and possibly also the Russians. Take note of what Putin and Trump have both said about how they've got super weapons that the rest of the world don't know about. I think they've essentially been warning each other about what they've got. Could it be that what they have was gifted to them by an NHI species? Not inconceivable. But as for the full Irid story by Ray, I'm sorry, Ray, I just don't believe that you'd post on Twitter and Reddit without being worried about your own safety, unless there's some way of completely anonymizing yourself on Twitter that I don't know about.
Okay, I have to read this email from Karen. The subject line caught my attention. Are human embryos being modified for space travel and colonization of Mars? For example, genetically engineered to withstand solar radiation and conditions on Mars that ordinary Earthlings cannot endure, engineered to enable space travel and advanced propulsion craft, engineered for longevity. Are some reported close encounters with aliens actually encounters with genetically modified humans? If human embryos are being grown and modified in labs, how would the public and world religions react? Love your work. Regards, Karen.
Look, frankly, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, there is obviously speculation about the reasons behind purported abductions and alleged experiments with humans. Maybe there is some kind of genetic manipulation going on. That's certainly being suggested. But why would it be specifically for Mars? Um, I don't know necessarily whether I agree with that. I mean, I certainly think that there are question marks about the rapidity of the development of human DNA. I know some DNA experts dispute this, and they would say that simple human evolution, mutations and changes over millions of years have made us what we are. But is there evidence that there's been tinkering with the human DNA? Has there been anomalous DNA inserted into our genetic structure? Maybe. I just don't know. I don't know enough about the science to be able to make a judgment one way or the other. It might, though, plausibly explain the reasons for abductions and why there is apparently some kind of NHI manipulation of humans in some kind of experiment. I simply don't know.
All right, Ross, we're going to squeeze one more in with you today. This is from Alex on X. 4 years ago, Ross said the whole world would be aware of an NHI presence interacting with the planet inside 2 years. This never happened. What changed?
Ross said that.
4 years ago,
He's
he
saying,
said, he is
I,
you.
oh, he's saying that I said that.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Did I?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, certainly, I actually do think the world is aware of an NHI presence. I mean, how more categorical can you get when you have people like Jay Stratton saying, I've seen alien craft and bodies? David Grush talking about a secret legacy program. What evidence do you need? I mean, obviously, it'd be nice if the president stood up and told the public the truth, but I think we're a long way now from the revelations of Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal in 2017, when the New York Times revealed the existence of a UFO investigation program secretly conducted within the Pentagon. We now know that UAPs are real. They are an authentic mystery. There is something anomalous that is engaging with this planet that is displaying the five observables. It's displaying hypersonic maneuvers, instantaneous velocity, stealth, transmedium, and non-visible means of propulsion. There is something clearly intelligent being manipulated inside our atmosphere, under our oceans, in our orbit, which we can't explain. And I do think that we're actually a long way into the admission. I get a lot of people moaning, frankly, whinging that, there hasn't yet been full disclosure. And I think the best advice is what Lou Elizondo said a few years ago, which is take 5 years off, go and do something else, get another hobby for 5 years and come back in 5 years. Because I think it might take that long. I think that we are at the beginning of a gradual realization, I think, within the structures of power around the world, that it's just becoming untenable to deny the obvious. And I think films like Age of Disclosure, films like Spielberg's, let's call it Disclosure, are going to play a part in broadening and widening public consciousness. But I think, to be frank with you, I think we're already a long way there. I don't really have a lot of patience for the people who say to me, oh, witness evidence isn't good enough. I'm not happy with that. I want harder evidence. Stop your whinging. Boring. Seriously. People have shown inordinate courage coming out and actually saying what they purportedly know. David Grush, Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, Jay Stratton. And I think we're going to see more of these people coming forward in the coming year and years. And ultimately, the only thing that I think will satisfy some people is if and when a government authority stands up and says at a lectern, ladies and gentlemen, we are not alone. There is a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet. But will people believe it even then? I'm not so sure they will. I think there's such a breakdown and such a corrosion of trust and faith in public institutions. I'm not even sure if people will believe it then. And this is the problem. This is why I think President Trump has to grapple with this as someone who has, I think, spoken about what he believes is a deep state. Here is an opportunity for the president to definitively make his stamp on the world, to be the president that actually reveals the truth. I think it's a moment of greatness in history for a president to be able to stand up and say, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry to have to reveal this, but you've been lied to. We've been misled for 80 plus years. We truly are not alone. And this is the reason why it's been withheld from you before now. I think, though, we're a long way down that track. And I actually don't recall saying 4 years ago that I said that I was going to be saying that NHI knowledge would be widely present. But if I did, I don't resile from it because I do think we've come a long way. And if people are disappointed, go and whinge somewhere else. I really don't care. I think that the simple fact is we're actually far more advanced than people realized. We have a Secretary of State, no less, a National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio, who has made statements indicating that he believes people who are talking about a legacy UAP retrieval and reverse engineering program. We have a president who has promised to get to the bottom of the matter, not highly endorsing, of course, of the idea that NHI are real, but willing to at least be prepared to investigate. And we have other officials who've indicated that they do believe that there is a cover-up. I think we've made a lot of progress, and I think, frankly, people need to sit back and take stock of the fact that we've come a lot further than we realize.
All right, two quick things, then I will let you go. One, I hope our viewers do not take 5 years off of watching us, especially you, Ross. And two, shortly after this Q&A airs, we will have an interview with Patrick Jackson, who has a really amazing theory about NHI interacting with us.
Yeah, it's funny, actually. I've actually been previously quite disdainful of Patrick's theory because it just seemed nonsensical to me. But the more I get into looking at Patrick's theory about these metal spheres that are being seen all over the world by multiple independent witnesses, the more I think he might just have a point.
Yep. Thank you so much, Ross.
No problem at all. And of course, if you do have questions for us, you can send them to realitycheck@newsnationnow.com. And of course, don't forget, you can listen to Reality Check because too much Reality Check is barely enough on all the major podcasts, Spotify, Audible included.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.